Texas, July 1943. The cattle car doors screamed open. Afternoon light hit 300 German prisoners like a slap, blinding them after hours in darkness. They stumbled onto the platform at Camp Swift, ankles stiff, throats dry as chalk. The Texas heat wrapped around them, dense, aggressive. Nothing like the dry burn of Tunisia, where they'd been captured 3 months before. And then the smell reached them. Charred meat, mustard, something sweet and tangy they couldn't name. On a folding table covered in red and white checkered cloth sat metal trays, steam rising in lazy coils. Sergeant William Davis stood beside it, arms crossed, watching them with an expression that wasn't quite sympathy and wasn't quite indifference, just duty. The prisoners stared. They'd expected prison rations, watery soup, stale bread. The kind of deprivation they'd helped inflict on others across North Africa and occupied Europe. Instead, they smelled food. Real food. And in that moment, standing in the brutal Texas sun with their stomachs knotted from hunger and their minds braced for cruelty, they began to realize that everything they'd been told about the enemy might have been a lie. Before we continue, if you're finding this story as powerful as I am telling it, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss more untold stories from World War II. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers around the world. Now, let's dive back into that Texas platform where 300 men were about to have their worldview shattered by something as simple as a hot dog. Klaus Hartmann was 24. He'd weighed 180 pounds when the war began. Now he weighed 135. His wrist bones pressed against skin like tent poles through canvas. Behind him, Friedrich squinted at the American sergeant, then at the food, his face caught between hunger and suspicion. In the camps they guarded, prisoners received what they deserved, which meant as little as possible. That was the order. That was discipline. This abundance felt like mockery, or worse, like a trap. But hunger has its own logic. Klaus moved forward. The line formed behind him. An American private handed him a paper plate. Another soldier, maybe 19, placed 2 hot dogs on it, the buns soft and white, the sausages dark and glistening. A third gestured to condiments. Mustard in a glass jar, relish green as summer grass, diced onions in a white bowl. Klaus stared. He'd eaten sausage his entire life, bratwurst at festivals, Weisswurst with sweet mustard on Sunday mornings in Munich. But this looked nothing like the food he knew. The bread was too soft, almost sweet. The sausage too small, too uniform, nestled in that pillowy bun like something from a child's toy kitchen. The young private pointed to the condiments. "Go ahead," he said. "Help yourself." Klaus took the yellow mustard, not the brown kind his grandmother made, and squeezed it onto the hot dog in a wobbly line. He stepped aside. Friedrich came next. Then Werner. Then Otto. Within minutes, 300 men stood in clusters across the platform, holding paper plates, staring at what they'd been given. No one ate. The American guards noticed. They glanced at each other, confused. A corporal from Ohio turned to Sergeant Davis. "What's wrong with them?" Davis watched the prisoners. Some sniffed the food. Others examined the hot dogs like they might hide poison. "They think it's a trick," Davis said quietly. He walked to the center of the platform, removed his cap, and picked up a hot dog from the table. He took a large bite, chewed slowly, swallowed, then he grinned. "It's food," he called out. "American food. You're in Texas now. We feed our prisoners." Klaus watched the sergeant. The man didn't look cruel. He didn't look like the propaganda posters. No exaggerated features, no malicious smile. He looked tired. He looked like someone who wanted to finish his shift and go home. Slowly, Klaus raised the hot dog to his mouth. He bit down. The first thing he tasted was the mustard, sharp, tangy, artificial in a way that shocked him. Then came the sausage itself, salty, smoky, but without the texture he expected. It wasn't coarse like bratwurst. 'Twas smooth, almost creamy, mixed with something sweet he couldn't identify. The bun dissolved on his tongue like cotton candy, leaving behind a faint taste of sugar and butter. It was nothing like German sausage. It was nothing like any food he'd eaten in 4 years of war. And it was warm. It was abundant. It was given freely. Friedrich bit next. Then Werner. Within seconds, the sound of chewing filled the platform. Some men ate slowly, savoring each bite. Others devoured both hot dogs in less than a minute, then stood motionless, as if waiting for punishment that never came. Otto Becker, a former schoolteacher from Bremen, ate his hot dogs and wept. Tears carved lines through the dust on his cheeks, dripping onto his empty plate. The private who had served him looked away, uncomfortable. "Why are you crying?" another prisoner whispered. Otto couldn't answer. How could he explain that the last year had been nothing but cold, hunger, and waiting? That in North Africa he'd watched men die from dysentery because they had no medicine, no clean water, nothing but sand and flies and orders that made no sense. That he'd surrendered expecting execution or at best starvation in a cage. Instead, he'd been given hot dogs with mustard on a paper plate like he was a guest at a Sunday picnic. The train pulled away 30 minutes later. The prisoners were marched to processing, fingerprinted, photographed, issued new clothes. Clean shirts, sturdy pants, boots without holes. Then they saw the mess hall. It stood at the center of the camp, larger than any building they'd seen since capture. Through the open doors, they could see rows of tables, benches, and at the far end, a serving line with trays of food, visible even from outside. "You'll eat dinner at 1800 hours, Sergeant Davis told them. 3 meals a day. No exceptions. Klaus found his bunk and sat down slowly. Around him, men whispered in German, their voices low and uncertain. "It's propaganda," someone said. "They're fattening us up for something. Maybe they're showing us off," another murmured. "Proof they treat prisoners well." "Or maybe," Friedrich said quietly, lying back on his cot, "maybe this is just how they do things here." No one responded. The idea was too strange to process. They had been told Americans were soft, decadent, incapable of real sacrifice. They had been told the enemy across the ocean was culturally inferior, obsessed with material comfort, lacking the discipline that made a true soldier. But if that was true, why were they the defeated, the captured, being treated better than they'd treated anyone during their own army's victories? That evening, the dinner bell rang across Camp Swift. The prisoners filed into the mess hall. Still uncertain, still watching for the trap. They picked up metal trays and moved through the serving line. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes with butter melting into valleys, green beans, white bread, soft and warm. Butter in small paper squares. Apple pie for dessert, the crust golden, the filling still steaming. Klaus sat at a long table with Friedrich and Werner. He looked at his tray. He looked at the Americans eating at nearby tables, their trays identical to his own. He looked at the serving line where cooks were already preparing seconds for anyone who wanted more. "I don't understand," Werner whispered. "None of this." Klaus picked up his fork and began to eat. The chicken fell apart at the touch, tender and seasoned with herbs he couldn't name. The potatoes were creamy, rich with butter and milk. The bread dissolved like the hot dog buns had, leaving sweetness behind. Halfway through the meal, he set down his fork and pressed his palms against his eyes. Friedrich glanced over, but said nothing. What was there to say? They had been hungry for so long. They had been cold, afraid, waiting to die. And now they sat in a mess hall in Texas eating roast chicken and apple pie, treated not like animals or enemies, but like men who deserved to eat. The propaganda they'd been fed about American cruelty, about the enemy's barbarism, dissolved with every bite. Over the following weeks, hot dogs became a symbol of everything the prisoners couldn't reconcile. They appeared at least once a week, sometimes twice. Always the same soft buns, smooth sausages, yellow mustard, relish if you wanted it. The Americans ate hot dogs casually, laughing between bites. For the German prisoners, each one carried weight. In late July, Klaus wrote to his mother, unsure she would ever read it. "We are fed 3 times a day," he wrote. "The food is strange, but plentiful. Yesterday, we had something called hot dogs. Softer than ours, sweeter. The guards eat the same food we do. I have gained 8 pounds. He didn't mention that describing adequate food made him cry or feel like he was betraying everything he'd believed about strength and sacrifice. Friedrich kept a forbidden diary, writing at night. August 3, 1943. Hot dogs again. Otto likes them now. Werner says they taste familiar, but wrong. Sergeant Davis joked about baseball. Some men are learning. By September, Camp Swift's routine had settled. Farm labor, mending fences, clearing brush. Hard work, but not cruel. They earned small wages for cigarettes and paper, and they ate well. Hot dogs, once shocking, became ordinary. Klaus began looking forward to chili-covered hot dog days. "It's the mustard," Otto said. "Makes you forget." "Forget what?" Werner asked. Otto hesitated. Why we're supposed to hate them. No one disagreed. Their certainty wasn't dismantled by speeches, but by consistency, food, respect, and the simple idea that enemies could treat them as human. In October, new prisoners arrived, gaunt from Italy. They stared at the steaming hot dogs the same way Klaus once had. Watching them, he realized how much he'd changed. By November, over 4,000 Germans lived at Camp Swift. Some worked for local farmers. Many of German descent, who offered water, fruit, even Sunday meals. At the Schneider farm, Klaus ate Sauerbraten and a hot dog for American tradition. Months earlier, it would have stunned him. Now, it felt almost normal. Driving back to camp, Klaus thought about hot dogs. Simple, abundant, freely given. The opposite of what he'd been taught. Winter came with blankets, hot soup, and hot dogs still on the weekly menu. On Christmas Eve, the camp held a special dinner. Roast turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, gravy, rolls with butter, pumpkin pie. The guards ate with the prisoners, tables mixed together. Someone brought a radio so they could listen to Christmas carols. Klaus sat next to Sergeant Davis. Neither spoke for a long time, focused on their meals. Then Davis set down his fork and looked at Klaus. "You doing all right?" Klaus nodded. "Yes, sir. Hard time of year to be away from family." "Yes, sir." Davis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know, I can't figure out how we ended up here. You and me, I mean, sitting at the same table eating turkey. 6 months ago, we were trying to destroy each other." Klaus had no answer. The question was too large, too complicated. How did anyone end up anywhere in war? "I think," Klaus said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "I think maybe we were lied to about many things." Davis nodded. He seemed unsurprised. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I think that's probably true." They finished their meal in silence. Later, walking back to the barracks under a sky dense with stars, Klaus thought about hot dogs again. Not the food itself, but what it represented. A kind of American optimism. A belief that things could be simple. That feeding someone didn't require complicated justification. In Germany, everything had required justification. Every privilege had to be earned. Every comfort defended as necessary for the greater cause. There was always a reason. Always a hierarchy. Always someone deciding who deserved what. Here, in this Texas prison camp, the logic was simpler. You're hungry. Here's food. You need shelter. Here's a bunk. You're a prisoner, but you're also a person. And persons deserve basic decency. It was almost unbearably American. By the spring of 1944, Klaus had been at Camp Swift for 9 months. He had gained 30 pounds. He spoke passable English. He had learned to play baseball, though he wasn't very good. He had eaten more hot dogs than he could count, and he had written dozens of letters to his mother, though he still didn't know if she received them. In April, he was transferred to a different work detail, this time helping build a new barracks. The work was harder, more physical. But he was stronger now, capable of labor that would have broken him the previous summer. During lunch break one day, the guards brought hot dogs. Klaus took his and sat under a tree, eating slowly, watching the other prisoners. Some were new arrivals, still adjusting to the strangeness of adequate food and decent treatment. Others were veterans like him, men who had been here long enough to forget sometimes that they were prisoners at all. Otto sat down beside him. "You ever think about what happens after?" he asked. "After what?" "After the war." "After we go home." Klaus chewed slowly, considering. "Sometimes," Otto said, "I think about it constantly. I think about trying to explain this place, this experience. I think about telling people that we were treated well, that the Americans fed us, that we had hot dogs and apple pie and baseball games. And I think about how no one will believe me. Why wouldn't they believe you? Because it contradicts everything we were told, everything we believed. If I tell people that the enemy was decent, that they treated us like human beings, then what does that say about us? About what we did?" Klaus had no answer. The question hung between them, heavy as the afternoon heat. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. News reached Camp Swift through radio broadcasts, through newspapers, through the sudden change in atmosphere among both guards and prisoners. There was relief, exhaustion, uncertainty about what came next. The prisoners would remain in Texas for months, waiting for repatriation arrangements. Some would stay more than a year. During that time, Camp Swift continued as it had. Work details: 3 meals a day, baseball games, letters home, and hot dogs. Always hot dogs. In June, on a day so hot the air shimmered like water, Klaus stood in line at the mess hall, waiting for lunch. The menu board listed hot dogs with chili. He took his tray and found a seat near the window. The hot dog looked the same as it had 2 years earlier. Same soft bun. Same smooth sausage. Same yellow mustard. But when Klaus bit into it, he tasted something different. Not the food itself, but what it meant. The hot dog, like all the others before it, represented a choice. The Americans had chosen decency over cruelty, abundance over deprivation. Camp Swift didn't just meet Geneva standards, it exceeded them. That simple choice to feed prisoners well did what no propaganda or lecture could. It made Klaus question everything he'd believed about power and greatness. A nation that fed its enemies hot dogs, he thought, was either foolish or confident. Perhaps both. He finished his hot dog, returned for seconds, and the Alabama cook smiled and added extra chili. Klaus went back to Germany in 1946 with a duffel bag, a few photographs, and memories he carried for life. Munich was rubble, but he found work as a translator for the American occupation forces, using the English he'd learned in Texas. In the 1960s, American fast food arrived in Germany. Klaus tried a hot dog in Munich. It tasted wrong, but the first bite transported him back to Texas, to the moment his beliefs began to crack. His daughter called it strange, and he agreed, yet finished it anyway, tasting memory more than food. The hot dog became his private symbol of mercy over cruelty, strength that fed rather than crushed, and the quiet generosity that reshaped him bite by bite.